The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion has hundreds of quests that put the player through different scenarios and events. These can lead to either resolved or unsettled conclusions. Some of the quests involve NPCs around these cities and local settlements that have their lives drastically changed by the player's deeds. Some of the other quests lead to fatalities and slayings of both noble and evil characters as well. A lot of these quests are a pure joy to be able to participate in and help develop the player's understanding and knowledge of Cyrodiil. However, there is a sparse yet defined group of quests that seem to leave a bad impression on most players. These quests are either redundant, not well structured, or too time consuming. Today's discussion is revolving around Oblivion's 3 most annoying quests that the player can go through. As a disclaimer, any first time player going through these quests is likely to find them at least a little bit enjoyable, educational, or thought-provoking. However, a seasoned player who has gone through these quests before is likely to see them as more of a chore or a hassle, knowing the outcomes lead to underwhelming results, or they are barriers to entry onto greater things. These quests were compiled from personal experiences as well as community forums. There are plenty of other quests that can be a nuisance, irritating, or time-wasting as well, but perhaps we'll go over them in another video. The quests about to be detailed are in no particular order. Starting off the list, the first annoying quest is actually a series of smaller tasks and errands the player must go through in order to join the Mages Guild. Upon speaking to any of the guild hall leaders in 7 out of 9 of the major cities, Kvatch does not have a guild anymore, and the Imperial City has the Arcane University, they will inform you that you need to receive a recommendation from every hub throughout Cyrodiil. The player must then go through 7 different tedious and underwhelming tasks in order to gain approval from every guild hall leader. Some of the quests are rather simple and don't involve too much effort on the player's part. An example is the Bruma recommendation, where every step of the quest takes place inside the guild hall. The leader, Jean Frisoric, will ask the player to find a missing member of the Mages Guild, Jaskar. Jaskar could be found by talking to Volinaro, his rambunctious friend, who will ask the player to steal Jean's instruction manual in which she uses for magic. In turn, Volinaro will reveal Jaskar's location. The missing Khajiit is actually using the Chameleon spell, and his shape can clearly be seen near Volinaro in the lower quarters, and he can even be interacted with. The player can also cast a Dispel spell on Jaskar, and his location will too be revealed. Either way, the task will be fulfilled, and Jean will give the player the recommendation. In their own way, these kinds of quests could be considered a waste of time. However, I would rather deal with these kinds of tasks over the lengthier chores that some of the guild halls make you do. For example, the Leowyn recommendation involves the player talking to the guild hall leader, Degale. Degale claims that she has lost a precious magical item. This magical item has been helping her calm her senses, as she now says the voices and visions she's experiencing have become way too overwhelming. She directs the player to a fellow Mages Guild member who tasks you with finding an amulet called the Seer Stone, which will put an end to Degale's sensory overload. By asking around and getting more clues to its whereabouts, it becomes clear that another resident mage, Calthar, has ill feelings towards Degale and doesn't see her fit to be in charge of the guild hall. When asked about the Seer Stone, through his emotional reaction and knowledge of it, it's clear he's hiding something and may know more than he lets on. Going back and speaking with Agata, the mage we were originally directed to, she will tell the player to try and get more information out of Degale on any possible leads. It's revealed Degale's father, whom has long since passed away, was stationed and buried at a nearby fort. On his body, he's likely to have a magical relic that will help solve Degale's visions and voices problem. The player then travels to said fort, Fort Blueblood, where marauders have set up camp and some fights break out between you and these enemies. There's even a warlord which must be killed, and the warlord is definitely a tough battle. Finally, the player retrieves the magical relic called Manduin's Amulet, and upon leaving, Calthar confronts the player saying that you've ruined his plan and demands the amulet to be handed over. He will then attack you, and he must be killed in order to loot his body for a key to escape the fort. Upon arriving back at the Leowyn Mages Guild Hall, the amulet is given to Degale and the recommendation is received. In truth, if these quests were individual and on their own schedules and timelines, Some of them wouldn't even be half bad and could even be considered better than some of the other quests in the game. It's due to the simple fact that all 7 of these quests are the barrier to entry for the Mages Guild. The Mages Guild has an excellent storyline and plenty of fun, thought-provoking quests, and all these guild recommendation tasks are a really poor reflection of what you'll actually experience as an apprentice and beyond. The other factions in the game, like the Arena, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Thieves Guild, have very brief introductions holding the player back from being a full-fledged member. The Mages Guild definitely should have taken a page from their books and not make the player question if it's even worth it to go through with joining the magical faction. The next annoying quest on the list, and likely to no one's surprise, is the quest titled Seeking Your Roots. Oblivion has no shortage of fetch quests, and these are where an NPC will ask the player to retrieve a specific item and either bring it back to them or to another NPC somewhere else in the game. Most of the time, these quests are simply a filler for a grander quest line that's taken place, or are commonly used to gain the player some gold, rewards, and fame points. This quest is activated upon the player randomly deciding to harvest a plant called Nirnroot. This plant emits a ringing noise and is very vibrant looking. When harvested, the quest begins by your journal entry suggesting the player should question alchemists across Cyrodiil for more information about these plants. By asking most alchemists around the major cities, they won't have a clue as to what this ingredient is, and in turn will direct you to seek out a man named Sindarian in Skingrad. By inquiring about the Nirnroots with Sindarian, he tells the player a lot of information that leads to him bringing up something called the Elixir of Exploration. This is a powerful potion that's meant for consumption. Sindarian will tell the player of a pond near Skingrad where he knows some Nirnroot can be harvested, and then tells the player to investigate there at once. The player will then go there and harvest 3 Nirnroots. Essentially, this entire quest revolves around harvesting Nirnroots and bringing them back to Sindarian, where he will then create powerful potions out of them. There's 2 catches, however. The first being he will only accept the plants in batches, and for the first exchange, it has to be a total of 10 Nirnroots. The second exchange is a total of 20 Nirnroots, the third is 30, and the fourth is 40. This totals 100 Nirnroots that need to be harvested. There are 300 in the game, so they are abundant. However, almost all are non-respawning, so if the player decided to use them for other purposes, they can create even more trouble and work for themselves. The second catch, and the worst of the two, is that apart from the initial location Sindarian marks for you on your map, there are no markers, waypoints, or anything of the sorts to track down these plants. The player is totally left on their own to find and harvest 100 Nirnroots with no way of knowing exactly where they are. The only hint the player receives is that they tend to grow by water, so wandering blindly on the shores of lakes, rivers, ponds, and the main bodies of water might yield some results. To make matters even worse, the Elixir of Exploration is a consumable potion that in its grandest form grants the player with the Night Eye ability, Fortify Fatigue and Health for 20 points, Fortify Blade, Destruction, Blunt, Restoration, Security, and Sneak for 10 points, all for 300 seconds. These are all buffs that can easily be made into armor enchantments or spells that will benefit the player way more in the long run, all while taking a shorter amount of time to produce. Overall, this quest turns out to be a massive waste of time if you don't know what you're getting yourself into. If you truly enjoy the collecting process in video games, or are interested in the alchemy skill and all it has to offer in Oblivion, perhaps a case can be made about enjoying it. But other than that, I truly believe there is little to no benefit to doing this quest. The third and final annoying quest we'll cover today is actually a part of the game's main quest line and is titled Allies for Bruma. The quest is given to the player immediately after completing the quest, Bruma Gate, in which an Oblivion Gate has opened outside the city of Bruma, and the player must lead the city guard through the hellscape and demonstrate how to close the gate. Once done, the player returns to Joffrey at Cloud Ruler Temple, who then tells the player it's a wise decision to ask for and receive aid from the other major cities of Cyrodiil, along with the guild factions. This is because they are planning a massive battle and risky maneuver that is soon to be executed outside of Bruma, which is opening a great gate to the plains of Oblivion. So far, this quest doesn't sound too bad. However, once you begin asking for help, this is where it can get annoying. For starters, none of the guild factions will send troops for aid in the upcoming battle. The most a player can do is enlist a follower from any of the factions, and that is the extent of their help and technically doesn't even count. The Imperial City tells the player that the Legion is stationed in specific areas across Cyrodiil and can't afford to have them removed from their posts, so no help there. In a similar fashion to the first entry on this list, each major city's count or countess, when asked for help, will tell the player that they have an Oblivion gate that's been opened outside their city and won't send reinforcements to Bruma unless their own gate has been dealt with. This is where the quest becomes extremely annoying and repetitive, as the player has to stumble their way and fight through 6 different Oblivion gates, with no directions or quest markers, in order to pull out their sigil stones. This comes from having just closed a gate over in Bruma, and leads into a quest of what is about to be closing another massive Oblivion gate as well. What's more is the most amount of troops a city guard will send you is 2, and most only send 1. Interestingly, Kvatch will even send somebody for the upcoming fight too if the quest Battle for Castle Kvatch was completed. These tasks are a fairly mindless and monotonous series of dungeon crawling quests that eventually will leave the player with a sense of frustration and displeasure. A silver lining is that this quest is actually totally optional and doesn't need to be completed to be able to continue with the main quest, Defense of Bruma. However, it is greatly recommended to go through with this annoying quest, as they will make a difference in the upcoming massive battle that takes place. If no support was sought out for by the player, the spots of the city guards are taken by NPCs called Bruma Militia, and these sellswords are severely less powerful both offensively and defensively than the city guards. They will die a lot quicker and leave the player to deal with both fighting off hordes of Daedra and protecting Martin's Septum. If the player's level is high, you're likely to fight some very problematic and dominant legions of Daedra, which will surely overpower the player. To sum up this quest, the player has to dungeon crawl through 6 consecutive Oblivion gates in order to receive very minimal help from the surrounding cities for the next quest. On top of these dungeon crawls, the player has already just completed 1, and after this quest, must complete another, which totals 8 crawls. The player is also asked to request aid from the Imperial City and the guild factions, but will receive none, in turn wasting their time. Most players will realize this quest is optional and might opt for the tougher fight during the next quest than to go through with what Allies for Bruma entails. Overall, when first playing through Oblivion and upon doing these quests, there might be an argument to make for their enjoyment and certain lessons taught while doing these quests. The Mages Guild recommendations, while there are many, familiarize the player with each city's guild hall, their residents, and what the hall can do for them. Seeking your roots can be a great introduction into the world of alchemy and what the player can achieve by simply scanning their surrounding environment. Allies for Bruma can continue to further test the player's memory and knowledge on Mehrunes Dagon's Realm of Oblivion, how to close the gates, and to receive sigil stones, which can be useful items. However, if you're a seasoned player, you'll understand that these quests are simply too time-consuming, repetitive, and not very enjoyable. If you haven't done any of these quests, all of them are optional and can be avoided, except for say the Mages Guild recommendations, as those are required to further join the guild and gain access to the Arcane University. Hopefully now, with newfound knowledge on these quests, the player can have an easier time getting through them, or outright disregarding them.